There are two kinds of people in New York, those who kneel and those who make them. Elena Rossi had spent her life on her knees, scrubbing, begging, praying. Lorenzo Valenti had spent his life standing over graves. But in 60 seconds, in a language that shouldn't exist anymore, in a prayer whispered between a waitress and a Don's mother, the entire hierarchy collapsed. Because the most powerful man in the city just realized he'd been waiting his whole life to hear someone pray for his soul. Welcome back to Mafia Folklore. Before this story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it? Don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like and share. Now, let's begin. New York City doesn't forgive the weak. It eats them. Elena Rossi understood this truth the way you understand gravity, not because someone taught you, but because you've fallen enough times to memorize the impact. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday that tasted like rain and regret, and she was on her knees again, always on her knees. The marble floor of Il Palazzo stretched before her like an accusation. White Carrara, imported from Italy, each tile worth more than 3 months of her rent. She scrubbed in small circles, her fingers raw and wrinkled from bleach, watching dirty water swirl around the bristles of her brush. The restaurant had closed 2 hours ago, but the real work, the invisible work, always happened after the last guest left, after the last cork was popped, after the last $100 bill exchanged hands. This was where people like her existed. In the margins, in the silence between courses. Her back ached. 24 years old, and her spine already curved like her grandmother's had in the final years. 2 jobs weren't enough. 3 barely kept the wolves from the door. And the wolves were always at the door. The debt collector's voice still echoed in her skull from yesterday's phone call. Your father's debt doesn't die with him, sweetheart. 200,000. That's what honor costs. That's what you owe. Honor. Her father's honor had cost her everything. Her Juilliard acceptance letter, folded and fading in a drawer. Her violin, sold to a pawn shop in Queens for $300 that disappeared into the endless black hole of interest payments. Her future, traded for a dead man's gambling addiction. Elena pushed herself up on trembling legs, dumping the bucket of filthy water into the industrial sink. Through the kitchen's swinging doors, she could see the dining room tables dressed in white linen, crystal chandeliers refracting light into 1,000 tiny stars, leather booths that smelled of money and secrets. Il Palazzo, the palace. She'd been working here for 3 weeks. It was the kind of place where senators ate beside CEOs, where deals were sealed over ossobuco and Barolo, where everyone spoke in quiet tones about loud things. The tips were good when she was allowed to serve. Mostly, she stayed in the back. The manager, Giancarlo, had been clear. You're pretty, but you're not that kind of pretty. The clientele here expects perfection. You scrub, you prep, you stay invisible. Invisible. She'd gotten good at that. Elena dried her hands on her apron, stained, fraying at the edges, and glanced at the ancient wall clock. 2:34 a.m. If she caught the night bus, she could be home by 3:15, sleep for 3 hours, then wake for her morning shift cleaning apartments in Tribeca. The math of exhaustion, the algebra of survival. She was reaching for her coat when the air changed. It happened fast, the way temperature drops before a storm. The kitchen staff, usually loud even during closing, went silent. Pans stopped clanging. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Giancarlo, who never stopped moving, froze with a wine bottle halfway to the rack. Someone was here. Elena felt it before she saw it, a shift in pressure, like the world was holding its breath. She turned slowly, her survival instincts screaming at her to stay still, to become wallpaper, to disappear into the grout between tiles. Through the narrow window in the kitchen door, she watched them enter. 4 men. No, 4 shadows wearing the skins of men. They moved like a military unit, scanning corners, checking exits, their hands resting near their waistbands, where Elena knew everyone knew the guns lived. They wore dark suits that absorbed light, earpieces coiled behind their ears, faces carved from stone and suspicion. But it was the 5th man who stole the oxygen from the room, Lorenzo Valenti. They called him Il Lupo, the wolf. Not because he was vicious, though he was, but because wolves move in silence, strike without warning, and never forget a scent. He didn't walk, he occupied. Space bent around him, rearranging itself to accommodate his presence. The charcoal suit he wore probably cost $40,000. Custom Neapolitan tailoring that moved like water over broad shoulders and a lean frame. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the chandelier light in sharp angles. But it was his face that held her. 32 years old, according to the whispers. Too young to control half of Manhattan's underworld. Too dangerous to question. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, dark hair swept back in a style that suggested both old-world elegance and new-world power. His eyes, God. His eyes were the color of espresso, nearly black, holding the kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too many bodies in your memory. He sat at table 1. The booth in the far corner, permanently reserved, never occupied by anyone else. It overlooked Fifth Avenue through floor-to-ceiling windows now streaked with rain, the city's lights bleeding into watercolor smears of red and gold. Lorenzo waved a hand, a small gesture, barely noticeable, and his guards retreated to the bar, giving him space. He wanted to be alone. Elena watched him settle into the leather booth, his movements economical, controlled. He loosened his tie silk, probably Hermes, and rolled his shoulders as if trying to shed the weight of the night. His eyes closed for just a second, and in that second, Elena saw something unexpected. He looked tired. Not sleepy. Tired. The bone-deep weariness of a man who's seen too much, done worse, and can't remember the last time someone touched him without fear or calculation. Rossi. Giancarlo's hiss snapped her back. The manager grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You deaf?" I said. "Get the San Pellegrino in a glass. Clean glass. You refill once. You don't make eye contact. And you vanish. Capiche?" Elena nodded, her mouth too dry to answer. "And Rossi?" Giancarlo's grip tightened. "Don't look at him. Don't breathe near him. Don't exist. The Don doesn't like..." The side door burst open. Not violently, not dramatically, but wrong. Off rhythm, off script. An elderly woman stumbled through, her designer coat hanging off thin shoulders, her silver hair escaping from what had probably been an elegant updo hours ago. She leaned heavily on a cane, her other hand clutching at the air as if searching for something or someone who wasn't there. Mama Donata Valenti. Elena had heard about her. Everyone had. The matriarch. The only person Lorenzo feared. The only person he loved. The only crack in the wolf's armor. Early onset dementia, the whispers said. Some days she was sharp as broken glass. Other days she forgot where or when she was. Tonight was not a good night. Donata looked around the restaurant, her eyes clouded with confusion and rising panic. She started speaking rapid, urgent, the words tumbling out in a stream of sound that made no sense to anyone in the room. It wasn't English. It wasn't even the standard Italian that half the staff spoke. It was Arborescia, an ancient Sicilian-Albanian dialect spoken only in a handful of mountain villages in southern Italy, a language carried by refugees 500 years ago, a tongue that was dying with its last speakers. The kitchen staff exchanged panicked glances. The guards at the bar straightened, hands moving toward weapons. Giancarlo went pale. No one knew what to do. To approach the Don's mother uninvited was death. To ignore her distress was worse. Donata's voice rose, cracking with fear. She was weeping now, clutching her chest, her cane clattering to the floor. She backed against the wall, sliding down slowly, her expensive coat pooling around her like a collapsing tent. Lorenzo stood. Fast. Too fast. His chair scraped against marble, a sound like a record scratch in the terrible silence. His hand moved to his jacket, where Elena knew the gun lived, and for a moment she saw something crack through his controlled exterior. Panic. Raw and human and terrifying because it made him mortal. He didn't know how to help her. The most powerful man in New York, the king of violence and strategy, was helpless watching his mother fracture in a language he couldn't speak, in a moment he couldn't control. Elena's grandmother's voice rose from memory, clear as church bells. "When you see someone drowning, tesoro, you don't ask permission to throw the rope." She moved. "Have you ever done something without thinking? Something that changed everything? Maybe it was reaching out to a stranger, speaking up when everyone else stayed silent, or choosing kindness when fear told you to run. Tell us in the comments what's the bravest thing you've ever done on pure instinct." The tray slipped from Elena's hands. It happened in slow motion, the kind of distorted time that comes with car crashes and confessions. The silver tray spinning through air, catching chandelier light, then hitting marble with a sound like a gunshot in a cathedral. Glass shattered. San Pellegrino exploded across white tile in a spray of carbonated violence. Every head turned. Every hand moved toward a weapon. Lorenzo's gun was halfway out of his holster, his eyes locking onto Elena with the cold focus of a predator identifying threat. For a half-second that lasted forever, she was certain she was about to die. But Elena wasn't running toward him. She was walking slowly, carefully, hands visible toward the crumpled figure of Mama Donata against the wall. The old woman was rocking now, her frail shoulders shaking with sobs, still speaking in that ancient, dying language that no one else in this golden room understood. No one except Elena. "Don't," Giancarlo hissed behind her, his voice strangled with terror. "Rossi, don't." But Elena was already kneeling. Her knees hit the cold marble, the same marble she'd been scrubbing minutes ago, and she barely felt it. The expensive floor soaked through her cheap uniform, but she didn't care. She reached out with hands that smelled of bleach and exhaustion, and gently, so gently, took Mama Donata's trembling fingers in her own. The old woman's eyes snapped to hers. Wild, unfocused, drowning in a moment that existed 50 years ago in a village that maybe didn't exist anymore. Elena squeezed her hands. Warm, real, present. "Mosushkete so, nonna," Elena whispered. "Don't worry, grandmother." The words came out in perfect Arboresha, the language of her own grandmother, the dialect learned at a kitchen table in Queens from a woman who'd carried it across an ocean like a secret, precious cargo. The language of mountain villages and old prayers, of women who'd survived by remembering when everyone else forgot. Mama Donata's breathing stuttered. Her eyes, milky with age and confusion, tried to focus on this stranger's face. Elena didn't let go. She held those weathered hands like they were made of porcelain and promises, and she began to pray. "Gemmi falla, O Mary, plot here. Hail Mary, full of grace." The Ave Maria, the oldest prayer, the one her grandmother had taught her when she was 6 years old and afraid of thunderstorms, the one whispered over rosary beads in a cramped apartment that smelled like bread and loneliness. Mama Donata's mouth opened slightly. Recognition flickered across her face like sunlight through breaking clouds. And then, miracle of miracles, she joined in. "Zoti eshtemiti, the Lord is with thee." 2 voices, one ancient and cracking, one young and clear, both speaking a language that shouldn't exist in this chrome and marble palace, both weaving together in a prayer that had survived wars and oceans and the slow erosion of time. The restaurant held its breath. Lorenzo Valenti stood frozen, his gun still half drawn, his entire body locked in a moment of complete cognitive dissonance. He was watching a waitress, a nobody, a ghost, someone he'd never noticed, kneel in a spreading puddle of sparkling water and hold his mother's hands like they mattered, like she mattered. And she was speaking. God, she was speaking the language he hadn't heard since he was 8 years old, since before his family had immigrated to New York, since before his father had taught him that sentiment was weakness and mercy was suicide. His hand slowly, so slowly released the gun. It slid back into the holster. His fingers trembled. When was the last time his fingers had trembled? Elena's voice never wavered. She recited the prayer with her eyes closed, her forehead nearly touching Mama Donata's, their joined hands between them like a bridge across decades and devastation. She smelled like cleaning chemicals and cheap shampoo. Her uniform was stained with coffee and struggle, and there was a hole in her left shoe that Lorenzo could see from where he stood. But the way she held his mother with a tenderness that made his chest physically ache was the most expensive thing in the room. Blessed art thou among women. Mama Donata's tears slowed. Her breathing evened. She brought Elena's hands to her lips, chapped, barely able to hold steady, and kissed them. A benediction. A thank you. A recognition of something sacred in a place that had forgotten what sacred meant. The prayer reached its end. The final words hung in the air like incense. Tani ine oren I videkjes sone. Amen. Now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Silence fell. Not the terrified silence from before, but something else. Something almost reverent. Mama Donata opened her eyes fully now, and they were clearer, still lost, but less afraid. She looked at Elena as if seeing an angel, as if this exhausted waitress with bleach-burned hands was a visitation from a god she thought had stopped listening. "Falminderit, Ingel I am," she whispered. "Thank you, my angel." She kissed Elena's hands again, then brought them to her own weathered cheek, holding them there like a child holds a comfort blanket. A small, broken sound escaped her throat, half laugh, half sob, and she smiled. Elena smiled back, tears tracking down her own face now. "Githmona nonna, always, grandmother." And then Elena remembered where she was. Her eyes lifted slowly, terror flooding back in cold waves, and she saw him, Lorenzo, standing 10 feet away, towering over them both, his face absolutely unreadable, the kind of blank expression that men wear right before they pull triggers. Elena released Mama Donata's hands gently, carefully, and pushed herself to standing. Her legs shook. Her heart was trying to escape through her ribs. Her voice cracked. She tried again in English, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, She was crying, and I couldn't." She backed away, hands raised in surrender or supplication or both. The puddle of sparkling water soaked into her shoes. Glass crunched under her feet. "I'll go," Elena stammered, already moving toward the kitchen door, toward escape, toward anywhere but here. "I'm fired. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so—" "Stop." One word. Quiet. But it cut through the air like a blade, stopping Elena mid-step. Lorenzo took a step forward, then another. His footsteps were silent on the marble. Expensive Italian leather makes no sound when it walks toward you. He moved past his guards, who parted like water, past Giancarlo, who looked like he might vomit, past the shattered glass and the puddles. He stopped directly in front of Elena. She was small, maybe 5'4". He was 6'2". She had to crane her neck to look at him, and doing so made her feel like prey recognizing predator. His cologne hit her something dark and expensive, cedar and tobacco and rain. His eyes, up close, were even more intense. "Black coffee, midnight, the color of choices you can't take back. What is your name?" His voice was low, controlled, with just the faintest accent, the ghost of Italian buried under years of American English. Elena's throat closed. She forced it open. "Elena Rossi." Lorenzo studied her face. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time. He saw the exhaustion carved into features too young for such depth of tired. He saw the bruise on her wrist, purple-green, a few days old, from carrying too many trays or maybe something worse. He saw the way her hands trembled, the hole in her shoe, the cheap cross necklace at her throat that she touched like a lifeline. And he saw something else. Something in her eyes that he'd forgotten existed in the world. Genuine compassion. Not calculated, not performed, real. She'd knelt for his mother not because she had to, but because she couldn't not do it. "Get your coat." "Elena," Lorenzo said quietly. The room seemed to tilt. Elena's face went white. "Please," she whispered, and she hated how it sounded broken, begging. "Please, I have a mother. I have debts. I'll leave the city. You'll never see me again. Please don't." "Get your coat," Lorenzo repeated, his expression unchanged. "You're done waitressing." Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. This was it. This was how it ended. You make one choice, one beautiful, stupid choice to help someone, and you get disappeared. You become a story other waitresses whisper about, a cautionary tale about knowing your place. Behind Lorenzo, Mama Donata made a small sound, confused, reaching out. One of the guards moved forward gently, helping her to her feet, wrapping her coat around her shoulders. She was still looking at Elena with that angel recognition, still smiling through her tears. "Giancarlo," Lorenzo said without turning. "Pay her out for the month, including tips." "Yes, Don Valenti." Giancarlo's voice was thin as paper. Lorenzo looked at Elena one more time. His expression shifted barely, just a millimeter, but enough. Something almost like curiosity flickered in those dark eyes, or maybe wonder. Or maybe just the recognition of having witnessed something he couldn't explain and didn't know how to categorize. A woman praying in a dead language. A nobody showing mercy to someone who mattered. An act of grace in a room that traded in violence. "My driver will take you home," Lorenzo said. "Be ready tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Someone will collect you." "For what?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Lorenzo turned away, already moving toward the door, his guards closing ranks around him and his mother. But he paused just for a second and looked back over his shoulder. "You speak to my mother in her language," he said simply. "She needs that. You'll be compensated appropriately." And then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking, or opening. Elena stood alone in the puddle of broken glass and sparkling water, her uniform soaked, her hands still tingling from where they'd held Mama Donata's, her mind spinning in freefall. Everyone thought she was dead, but the wolf had spared her. No worse than spared. He'd hired her. Giancarlo appeared at her elbow, thrusting an envelope into her shaking hands. His face was ashen. "I don't know what you did, Rossi," he hissed. "But may God have mercy on your soul." He walked away fast, as if whatever curse she'd just contracted might be contagious. Elena looked down at the envelope. It was heavy, real paper, expensive. The kind of envelope that contains either paychecks or death sentences. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was $3,000 in cash, more money than she'd made in 3 months, and a card cream-colored, embossed with an address in Long Island, and a single line written in elegant script. 7 a.m. Bring nothing. Everything will be provided. Elena's knees gave out. She sat down right there on the wet marble, glass crunching around her, and started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind that comes when your brain can't process reality anymore, when the absurdity becomes too heavy, when you're either blessed or damned, and you're not sure which. She'd prayed with a mafia boss's mother, and now she belonged to the wolf. Outside, rain hammered against the windows, the city lights bled, and somewhere in the darkness, Elena knew, Lorenzo Valenti was thinking about a waitress who'd stolen something from him in 60 seconds. Not money, not power, not territory, something far more dangerous. His attention. The Rolls-Royce Phantom didn't just drive, it glided, like a shark through dark water, silent and inevitable. Elena sat in the back seat at 6:47 a.m., her hands folded in her lap to stop them from shaking, watching Long Island's wealthy neighborhoods blur past the tinted windows. She wore the same clothes from last night, hadn't dared go home, hadn't slept, had spent the hours between midnight and dawn sitting in an all-night diner in Queens, clutching that envelope of cash and wondering if she should run. But where do you run when a wolf knows your scent? The driver, silent, stone-faced, built like a granite monument, had picked her up exactly at 7. He hadn't spoken, hadn't looked at her, had simply opened the door and waited while she made the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Now they turned through iron gates that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The estate sprawled before her like something from a different century, a different country. Manicured lawns rolled toward a mansion that could have housed 50 families. Venetian architecture, creamstone, arched windows, a fountain in the circular driveway where marble angels wept into crystal-clear water. This was where monsters lived when they took off their monster suits. The car stopped. The driver opened her door. Elena stepped out on legs that felt borrowed, looking up at the entrance where a woman waited. Older, severe, dressed in an elegant black suit that screamed, estate manager, or possibly enforcer in Prada. Miss Rossi. Not a question, a confirmation. I'm Signora Bianchi. I manage the household. Come. Elena followed her through doors that belonged in a museum mahogany, hand-carved, probably older than America. The interior stole her breath. Marble floors veined with gold, frescoed ceilings depicting scenes from Dante. A grand staircase that curved upward like a question mark made of white stone. But it was the silence that unnerved her most. The house felt empty despite its size. No staff rushing about, no voices. Just the click of Signora Bianchi's heels echoing through vast rooms. Mama Donata is still sleeping, the woman said without turning. You'll meet her at 9. Your duties are simple. Companionship, conversation, assistance with daily activities. She responds to you. Don Valenti values this. A pause, weighted with meaning. Do not make him regret his decision. They climbed the staircase, 2nd floor, then 3rd. A hallway lined with portraits of stern men in old-world clothing. The Valenti lineage, probably. Generations of wolves. Signora Bianchi stopped at a door, produced a key. Your room. Clothing has been provided in your size. Toiletries. Everything you need. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. You'll eat with the family. Another pause. Don't be late. She left before Elena could ask what the family meant. The room was bigger than Elena's entire apartment. A 4-poster bed with silk sheets. An antique writing desk by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that stretched toward the sound. A bathroom of white marble and gold fixtures. And a walk-in closet containing clothes that Elena recognized from window shopping on 5th Avenue. The kind of window shopping where you don't go in because the security guard's eyes tell you that you don't belong. Dresses, slacks, cashmere sweaters, all in her size, all with the tags removed. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud, and finally let herself cry. Not sad tears, not happy tears, the confused tears of someone whose life has been ripped in half, whose reality has fractured into before and after. Before, scrubbing floors, drowning in debt, invisible. After, this. Whatever this was. She cried until she was empty, then washed her face in a bathroom sink that probably cost more than her father's funeral. She changed into simple clothes, dark slacks, a cream blouse, and braided her hair, looked at herself in the mirror. Same face, same person, but standing in a different world. Have you ever felt like your life changed in an instant? Like you woke up in a reality you didn't recognize? Maybe it was a new job, a move to a new city, or meeting someone who turned your world upside down. How did you adapt? Tell us in the comments. The days blurred together in a strange golden haze. Mama Donata was both easier and harder than Elena expected. On good days, she was sharp, witty, warm, full of stories about Sicily and the old country, about raising Lorenzo when he was small and soft, and hadn't yet learned that love was liability. On bad days, she thought Elena was her sister Rosa, dead 40 years. She thought the mansion was her childhood home. She spoke only in Arborescia, and wept for people who existed only in memory. Elena learned to flow between the moments, to be Rosa when needed, to be herself when possible, to hold wrinkled hands and pray in the language of ghosts. But it was Lorenzo who haunted her. He was everywhere and nowhere. She'd catch glimpses through a doorway, across the garden, descending the stairs at dawn in running clothes that suggested he didn't sleep much either. He never approached, never spoke, just watched. She felt his eyes on her when she walked Mama Donata through the rose garden, felt him observing when she read to the old woman from Italian poetry books, felt the weight of his attention like sunlight through a magnifying glass, warm at first, then burning. 3 weeks passed, then a month. Elena stopped expecting to wake up back in her old life. The debt collectors stopped calling someone had paid them off, though no one said who. Her mother's apartment was suddenly safe. Her old life was dissolving like sugar in water, and this new existence was crystallizing in its place. Strange, surreal, and surprisingly lonely, because despite the luxury, despite Mama Donata's sweetness, Elena was still invisible. The handful of staff who came and went didn't speak to her. Signora Bianchi treated her like a particularly valuable piece of furniture, and Lorenzo was a ghost in an expensive suit, present but untouchable. Until the piano. It was 2:33 a.m. Elena had checked her phone when she woke to music. Not recorded music. Live. Someone playing Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the notes drifting through the mansion's bones like smoke. She shouldn't have followed the sound. Should have stayed in bed, respected boundaries, remembered her place. But the music was so beautiful it hurt. And it had been so long since she'd heard live piano, since she'd been near music at all. She found him in the library. The room was dark except for a single lamp, casting Lorenzo in amber and shadow. He sat at a grand piano, a Steinway, probably worth $250,000, his fingers moving across the keys with the kind of precision that comes from years of practice. He'd shed his jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars, thin white lines that told stories he'd never speak aloud. Elena stood in the doorway, frozen. She should leave, should definitely leave. But God, the way he played. The nocturne was melancholy and angry all at once, notes cascading like tears and fists. He played like a man trying to exorcise demons, like music was the only language honest enough to hold what he couldn't say. The piece ended. His hands stilled on the keys. Silence rushed in like water filling a void. "You can come in," Lorenzo said without turning. "I know you're there." Elena's heart stopped. "I'm sorry. I heard I shouldn't have." "Sit." It wasn't a request. She entered slowly, her bare feet silent on Persian rugs, worth more than cars. There was a leather chair near the piano, deep burgundy, soft with age. She sat on its edge, hands clasped, every muscle ready to run. Lorenzo finally looked at her. He looked exhausted, not just tired, but exhausted in the way of soldiers after war. His hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead. His shirt was partially unbuttoned. And his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, held something she hadn't seen before. Curiosity, maybe loneliness, maybe both. "You play?" he asked. "I did. Once." Elena's voice was quiet. "Violin, not piano." "Why did you stop?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "Life stopped me," she said finally. "Debt, survival, the usual reasons people like me give up beautiful things." Lorenzo nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense, as if he understood the algebra of loss. "Play something." "I don't have a violin. There's one in the closet, behind the Vivaldi scores." Elena blinked. "Why do you have a violin?" "My father played." Lorenzo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Before what?" He didn't say. Elena didn't ask. She found the instrument a beautiful piece, old and well-maintained, probably Italian. When she lifted it, something in her chest cracked open. She hadn't held a violin in 3 years. 3 years of silence and scrubbing and forgetting who she used to be. She tucked it under her chin, drew the bow across strings. The sound was immediate, pure, aching, and then she played. Not Chopin. Something simpler. An old Sicilian folk melody her grandmother used to hum while cooking. The kind of tune that carries memory in its bones, that sounds like sunlight on ancient stone and the sea and loss and home all at once. When she finished, her eyes were wet. Lorenzo was staring at her with an expression that made her feel suddenly exposed. Seen. Really, truly seen for the first time in years. Where did you learn the dialect? His voice was rougher now, stripped of its usual control. My grandmother. Nonna Caterina. Elena set the violin down carefully, like it might shatter. She was from Piana degli Albanesi. Came to New York when she was 16. She said the language was all she had left of home, so she taught it to me. Made me memorize prayers, songs, stories. She died when I was 12. That's why you pray in Arborish. It's the only way I know how. Elena looked at him directly now, finding courage in the darkness. Prayer was her love language. When I pray in her words, I'm still connected to her, to something that mattered before everything became survival. Lorenzo stood, walked to the window overlooking the gardens. The moon was 3/4 full, painting everything in silver. His reflection in the glass looked like a painting Renaissance portrait of a man at war with himself. My mother forgets English now, he said quietly. Sometimes she forgets Italian. But she never forgets Arborish. It's the language of her childhood, before everything became complicated. Before my father brought her to America and turned our family into what it is. He paused. I can't give her that. Can't speak it fluently enough to reach her when she's lost. I thought I'd fail her completely, and then I showed up. And then you showed up. Lorenzo turned, and the look in his eyes made Elena's breath catch. You knelt for her, not because you had to, not because you were told. You saw someone suffering and you chose compassion over fear. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Elena shook her head slowly. In my world, Lorenzo continued, moving closer. Everyone wants something. Every kindness has a price tag. Every gesture is calculated. But you, he stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne again, cedar and smoke. You didn't know who she was, didn't know what helping her might cost you. You just helped. I'm not special, Elena whispered. I'm just... You pray for peace, Lorenzo interrupted softly. You pray for people you don't know, in a language that's dying, to a God who might not be listening. I envy that. I've forgotten how to pray. I've forgotten how to want anything beyond survival and control. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, to reject, and touched her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, gentle in a way that seemed impossible from hands she knew had dealt violence. Maybe you just need someone to pray for you, Elena heard herself say, her voice barely audible. Lorenzo's eyes darkened with something that wasn't anger, something more dangerous. You stole my heart in that restaurant, Elena. His voice was rough velvet, confession and curse. Not because you were beautiful, though you are. Not because you were convenient. But because you were brave enough to love something broken. To see my mother as human. Not as an extension of me. To choose grace when the world would have chosen silence. He was so close now. Elena could feel the heat of him, could count his eyelashes if she wanted, could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow that suggested a childhood accident or adult violence. I'm not good, Lorenzo continued. I'm not safe. I've done things that would make you run if you knew. I'm stained with choices that don't wash off. But when I'm near you... He stopped, jaw clenching. When I'm near you, I remember what it felt like to be human. Elena's hand moved without permission, reaching up to touch his face. Her fingers, still rough from old calluses, traced his cheekbone, his jaw. He closed his eyes like her touch was painful and necessary all at once. I see you, she whispered. Not the wolf, not the dawn. You, Lorenzo. His eyes opened, and the intensity in them could have ignited paper. Elena. The phone rang. Sharp, insistent, the specific ringtone that meant business, danger, the outside world crashing in. Lorenzo's entire body went rigid. The moment shattered like glass. He pulled away, his mask sliding back into place with terrifying efficiency, the tender man disappearing, the dawn returning. He answered on the third ring. Valenti. Elena watched his face change, watched warmth become ice, watched his jaw set in the way that meant someone, somewhere, had just made a fatal error. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. Longer. I see. He hung up, stood perfectly still for 3 seconds, processing. Then he looked at Elena, and she saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Go to your room, he said quietly. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Signora Bianchi. What's wrong? Elena, room, now. She ran. Behind her, she heard Lorenzo making calls, his voice sharp and commanding, barking orders in Italian too fast for her to follow. She heard other voices, guards materializing from whatever shadows they lived in, heard doors opening, cars starting. She locked herself in her room, heart hammering, and went to the window. Below, in the circular driveway, Lorenzo emerged. He wore a different jacket, now tactical, dark. Armed guards flanked him. 3 black SUVs waited, engines running. He paused before getting in, looked up at her window. Their eyes met across distance and darkness, and then he was gone. Elena pressed her forehead against the glass and realized with absolute certainty that something had changed tonight. Not just between them, but in the fundamental architecture of her world. She'd felt something in that library. Connection. Desire. The first whisper of something that could have been love if they'd had time, if they'd lived different lives. But time, she was learning, is the one thing you can't buy. Even with all of Lorenzo's money. Even with all his power. The phone he'd left on the piano buzzed. Once. A text message illuminating the dark room. Elena shouldn't have looked, but fear makes you stupid, and curiosity makes you reckless. The message was from a contact labeled only M. Moretti. I see you have a new house guest. Pretty girl. Elena Rossi. Let's talk. Elena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the expensive rug, her mind spinning. Someone knew she was here. Someone knew her name. And whoever Marco Moretti was, he was dangerous enough to make Lorenzo's face go white. She'd been here a month. A month of safety, of prayers with Mama Donata, of stolen moments and slowly dissolving loneliness. A month of pretending the past didn't exist. But the past, apparently, had teeth. And it had just found her. Outside, dawn was breaking over Long Island, pink and gold and beautiful. Elena sat in her gilded room and finally understood. She wasn't a companion. She wasn't a guest. She was bait, or maybe a hostage, or maybe worst of all, something Lorenzo actually cared about, which made her the most dangerous thing in his world, a weakness the wolf's enemies could exploit. Lorenzo returned at dawn with blood on his collar. Elena saw him from her window, watched the SUVs roll back through the gates just as the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violence. Red, orange, the color of things burning. He stepped out of the lead vehicle, moving like something hurt but refusing to show it. His jacket was gone. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and there, right there on the white collar, a spray of something dark that wasn't his own. She should have stayed in her room. Should have followed orders. But fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like caring, pulled her down the stairs, through the empty hallways, still sleeping in pre-dawn quiet, until she found him in his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions he probably never read, a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed countless decisions between bad and worse. Lorenzo stood with his back to her, pouring whiskey into a crystal tumbler despite the early hour. I told you to stay in your room. His voice was flat, scraped raw. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're lying. Elena closed the door behind her. Let me see. Elena, let me see, Lorenzo. He turned, and the look on his face stopped her breath. Not anger. Something worse. Resignation. The expression of a man who'd been waiting for this shoe to drop since the moment he'd let her into his life. He pulled off his shirt in one smooth motion, revealing the landscape of his torso, muscle, and scars. A roadmap of violence survived, but it was the fresh wound on his shoulder that made Elena gasp. A graze, probably from a bullet. Bleeding sluggishly through makeshift bandaging, she moved without thinking, grabbing the first aid kit from the cabinet, because of course there was a first aid kit in his study, because this was probably routine, and guided him into the leather chair. This needs stitches, she said, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. Her hands were steady despite everything. Muscle memory from caring for her father's drunken injuries. From years of holding things together when they wanted to fall apart. It's had worse done with less. Lorenzo's jaw was tight, but he didn't flinch as she worked. Marco Moretti sent men to the port tonight. 10 of them. Thought they could take our shipment, send a message. Did they? They're dead. Simple. Factual. The way you might say it rained last Tuesday. All of them. But that's not the message that matters. Elena's hands paused. What message matters? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, staring at the whiskey in his hand like it held answers it didn't have. Marco knows about you. Not just that you exist. Your full name, where you came from, who your father was. The room tilted. My father? Antonio Rossi. Small-time gambler. Big-time debts. You knew this part. Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and she saw something that looked almost like apology. What you didn't know is that 10 years ago, your father didn't just gamble. He worked as a courier, moving packages for whoever paid. One of those packages belonged to Marco Moretti. 2 million in uncut diamonds. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. No, your father took the package, disappeared for 3 days. When he showed up, the diamonds were gone. He claimed he was robbed, but everyone knew he was lying. Moretti wanted blood. Your father ran, hid, took his wife and daughter, took you, and disappeared into Queens like a ghost. He never said. Elena's voice cracked. He never told us. Men like your father don't tell. They just keep running until the road ends. Lorenzo reached up, his hand covering hers where it still rested on his shoulder. Moretti's been looking for him ever since. And when your father died 3 years ago, the debt transferred. To you, the pieces fell into place like a knife finding ribs. The loan sharks. The impossible debt that never decreased no matter how much she paid. The threats. The fear. I was never paying off gambling debts, she whispered. I was paying off stolen diamonds. You were paying off the interest on a blood debt that can't be repaid with money. Lorenzo's grip on her hand tightened. In Moretti's world, your father's theft wasn't business. It was personal. An insult. And the only payment he'll accept is what he's always wanted. Me. You. Elena pulled her hand away, stood up, back toward the door. Her mind was racing, fragmenting, trying to process reality spinning into nightmare. That's why you brought me here. Not for your mother. For protection. I'm what? Collateral? A hostage? No. Lorenzo stood too, and despite his wound, despite the blood on his collar, he moved with the controlled power of a predator. You were never collateral to me. You were... He stopped, jaw working. You were supposed to be safe here. Hidden. Moretti has eyes everywhere, but not in my home. Not in my life. I thought I could protect you without him knowing. But he knows now. He knows now. How? Lorenzo's face went dark. I have a rat. Someone close. Someone who reported your presence to Moretti. I'll find them. I'll handle it. But that's not. He took a breath, and Elena saw something she'd never seen before in those dark eyes. Fear. Moretti called me tonight. During the port raid. He wanted me to know it wasn't about the shipment. It was about you. Elena's back hit the door. What does he want? He wants to meet. Neutral ground. He wants you handed over willingly. Or... Lorenzo stopped. Or what? Or he sends his men to the care facility where I keep my aunt. To the church where my mother used to pray before the dementia. To every place where people I care about are vulnerable. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. He'll burn everything I love until I give him what he wants. And what he wants is you. The room was too small suddenly, the air too thin. Elena felt the walls closing in. Felt the trap she'd walked into without knowing. Felt the weight of her father's sins pressing down on her shoulders like Atlas holding the sky. Then give me to him. The words came out steady despite the terror. Let him have me. I won't let other people die because my father was a thief. I won't let your mother, your aunt, anyone. Stop. Lorenzo was in front of her in 3 strides, his hands on her shoulders, his face inches from hers. Stop. You think I'm going to hand you over? You think I brought you into my home, let you into my life, felt you stir something I thought was dead, and then I'm just going to gift wrap you for a psychopath? What choice do you have? Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and bitter. I'm not worth a war. I'm not worth people dying. I'm just... You're everything. The words tore out of him like a confession, like something he'd been holding back with chains that just snapped. You're everything, Elena. You walked into my restaurant and showed mercy to my mother when you had every reason to be afraid. You speak to her in the language of her childhood. You play violin in the middle of the night like you're praying with strings instead of words. You look at me like I'm a man instead of a monster. His hands moved from her shoulders to her face, cradling it like something precious and breakable. I'm stained with blood. I've done things that would make you run. I'm going to hell if hell exists. And I know it. But you, his voice cracked. You're the first good thing I've chosen in 20 years. The first thing that's mine that isn't built on fear or loyalty or money. And I will burn New Jersey to the ground before I let Moretti touch you. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze, the terrible, beautiful weight of being chosen by someone like Lorenzo Valenti. He wants to meet, she whispered. When? Where? Tomorrow night, midnight. St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Neutral ground. Consecrated ground. He thinks it'll keep me honest. Thinks I won't start a war in a church. Will you? Something dark and feral moved behind Lorenzo's eyes. That depends on what he does, on what he says, on whether he tries to take what's mine. I'm not a possession, Lorenzo. No. He leaned in, his forehead touching hers, his breath warm against her lips. You're worse. You're a choice. And I don't get to make choices like this. Men like me don't get to want things that aren't part of the plan. But I want you. God help me. I want you safe and happy and alive. And I want to be the reason you smile instead of the reason you're scared. He kissed her then. Not gentle, not tentative. Desperate and claiming and tasting like whiskey and dawn and decisions you can't take back. Elena kissed him back, her hands fisting in his ruined shirt, pulling him closer despite the blood and the danger and the absolute certainty that this was a terrible idea. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to that meeting tomorrow, he said quietly, and I'm going to make Moretti understand that you're untouchable, that coming after you is suicide, and if he doesn't believe you, Lorenzo pulled back, and the look in his eyes was the wolf returning, cold, calculating, lethal. Then I'll make him a believer. The next night, St. Patrick's Cathedral, 11:47 p.m. Manhattan at midnight was all shadows and sodium lights, rain beginning to fall in that way that turns the city into a noir painting. Elena sat in the back of the armored Mercedes, flanked by two of Lorenzo's most trusted guards, watching the cathedral approach like a judgment. St. Patrick's. Gothic revival architecture reaching toward heaven with spires that looked like prayers made of stone. The bronze doors were cracked open, warm light spilling onto the wet steps. Lorenzo sat across from her, dressed in black tactical clothing that somehow looked elegant on him, like violence and fashion had a child. He'd barely spoken during the drive from Long Island. His face was the mask she'd seen that first night at Il Palazzo. Unreadable, controlled. The Don instead of the man who'd kissed her 12 hours ago. Stay in the car, he said as they pulled up. Not a suggestion. An order. Lorenzo. Elena. His eyes met hers, and for just a second the mask cracked. Please. For once listen to me. Stay in the car. If things go wrong, if you hear gunfire, you tell Tommaso to drive. Don't stop. Don't look back. There's a safe house in Connecticut. Signora Bianchi knows where. You go there and you wait. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. His hand reached across the space between them, cupping her face one more time. I need to know you're safe. I can't think clearly if I'm worried about you. And I need to think very clearly tonight. Elena caught his hand, pressed it harder against her cheek. Come back to me. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or longing, or the terrible recognition that someone actually cared if he lived or died for reasons that had nothing to do with money or power. I'll try, he said simply. Then he was gone, stepping out into the rain, his team materializing around him, 6 men, all armed, all moving with the synchronized precision of soldiers who'd bled together. They entered the cathedral. Elena sat in the dark car, listening to her heartbeat count the seconds. Inside St. Patrick's, the air smelled like incense and old prayers, like centuries of people asking God for things they didn't receive. The vast space stretched upward into Gothic arches and stained glass that would be beautiful in daylight but looked ominous now, lit only by hundreds of votive candles. Marco Moretti stood by the altar. He was older than Lorenzo, mid-50s, silver threading through black hair slicked back in old-world style. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that suggested he ate smaller predators for breakfast. 10 men flanked him, all armed, all watching Lorenzo's approach with the flat eyes of career killers. Lorenzo stopped 20 feet away, his hands visible but ready. Marco. Lorenzo. Moretti's voice echoed off vaulted ceilings, smooth as expensive wine. Thank you for coming. I know midnight mass isn't your usual scene. You wanted to talk, so talk. Direct. I like that about you, Lorenzo. No games, no pretense. Moretti began walking down the center aisle, footsteps clicking on marble. I want the girl, Elena Rossi. You know why? Her father stole from me. The debt is old but valid. I'm willing to be generous, you hand her over. I forgive the port raid. We go back to business as usual. No war, no bloodshed, just clean accounting. No. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Moretti stopped, raised an eyebrow. No? That's your entire negotiation? That's my entire negotiation. Lorenzo's voice was quiet, controlled. Elena Rossi is under my protection. She's mine. You don't touch her. You don't threaten her. You don't speak her name. She's off the table. Yours? Moretti laughed a sound with no humor in it. Since when does Lorenzo Valenti claim women like stray dogs? Since when do you care about a waitress with nothing to her name except debt and a dead father's sins? Since she became mine, Lorenzo repeated. And that's all the explanation you're getting. Moretti's smile faded. You're starting a war over a girl, over nothing. She's not nothing. She's a debt that needs to be paid. Then consider it paid. Lorenzo took a step forward, and every one of his men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. I'll give you $2 million in cash. Clean money. The value of the diamonds her father stole. Adjusted for inflation. You get your money. The debt is settled. Elena walks free. Moretti was quiet for a long moment, studying Lorenzo's face. Then he shook his head slowly. It's not about the money anymore, Lorenzo. You know that. It's about respect. It's about the principle. Her father humiliated me, made me look weak. The only way to restore that is blood. Then take mine. Lorenzo's hand moved to his holster, pulled out his gun slowly, and set it on a nearby pew. 1-on-1. You and me. You win. You get whatever satisfaction you need. I win. You disappear from Elena's life forever. No guns. No backup. Just two old-school men settling accounts the way our grandfathers would have. The cathedral held its breath. Moretti stared at Lorenzo, surprise flashing across his features. Then calculation. Then something almost like respect. You'd risk your life for her, he said slowly. Actually risk it. For a girl you've known what? A month? Yes. Why? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Because she prays for peace in a world that forgot what peace sounds like. Because she showed kindness to my mother when everyone else showed fear. Because when she looks at me, she sees a man worth saving, even though I'm not. He paused. And because walking away from her to protect my territory, my empire, my power that would make me exactly the monster I'm afraid I am. Moretti studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He pulled his own gun, set it on the altar, and started removing his jacket. You always were different, Lorenzo, he said quietly. Your father would have handed over the girl in a heartbeat, would have seen her as leverage, not a liability. But you, he rolled up his sleeves. You've got your mother's heart hidden under all that wolf bullshit. Is that a compliment or an insult? It's an observation. Moretti stepped down from the altar, moving into the open space near the front pews. And maybe a reason I'm going to give you this chance. 1-on-1, hand-to-hand, winner takes all. Lorenzo moved forward, already calculating angles, weaknesses. The way Moretti favored his left side from an old injury. What happens to Elena if I lose? I'm a man of my word. If you lose, she pays her father's debt. If you win, Moretti shrugged, she's yours. The debt dies here. And I never speak her name again. They faced each other in the candlelight, two predators who'd been circling this moment for years, using a girl they'd never met as the excuse to finally settle old scores. For her, Lorenzo said quietly, almost to himself. And then he moved. The fight was brutal, fast, nothing like Hollywood, just two men who knew violence intimately, trading blows with the efficiency of professionals. Moretti was heavier, older, but experienced. Lorenzo was younger, faster, but carrying injuries from the night before. They crashed into pews, scent candles scattering. Blood splattered on consecrated marble. Outside, Elena heard something through the car's thick windows, a crash, a shout, the sound of chaos contained in stone walls. Her hand went to the door handle. Tommaso, the driver, locked the doors. Don's orders, Miss Rossi. Something's wrong. The Don can handle himself. But Elena saw it then, movement on the cathedral steps. Not Lorenzo's men. Different men, 3 of them, emerging from shadows, moving toward the car with purpose and guns, and the cold efficiency of professionals who'd been waiting for this moment. Tommaso, he saw them too, reached for his weapon. But one of the approaching men was faster. The driver's window shattered. Gunfire. Tommaso slumped forward, blood blooming across his white shirt. Elena screamed. The back door was yanked open. Hands grabbed her, pulled her out into the rain and night. She fought, kicked, scratched, bit, but they were too strong, too many. Inside the cathedral, Lorenzo was winning. He'd gotten Moretti on the ground, his forearm across the older man's throat, victory seconds away. And then he heard it. Through the thick doors, through stone and distance. Elena, screaming his name. He turned. Mistake. Moretti's fist caught him in the kidney, sent him sprawling. But Lorenzo was already moving, already running, already leaving the fight unfinished, because the only fight that mattered was outside. He burst through the cathedral doors to see the Mercedes with its driver dead, the back door open, and Elena being dragged toward a black van by 3 men. She was still fighting, still screaming, still refusing to go quietly. God, she was magnificent. Lorenzo's team poured out behind him, weapons drawn, but Moretti's men came out too, all hell breaking loose on the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral, gunfire shattering the sanctity of consecrated ground. Lorenzo ran, ignored the bullets, ignored the odds, ignored everything except Elena's voice cutting through the chaos, calling his name like a prayer, like she believed he could save her. One of her captors saw him coming, raised his gun. Lorenzo was faster, closed the distance. The fight was close, vicious. Lorenzo took a bullet to the shoulder, the same shoulder as last night, but kept moving, driven by something deeper than pain. He reached Elena just as they were shoving her into the van, grabbed her hand. Their eyes met. "I've got you," he gasped. And then the world exploded. The explosion wasn't literal, no bomb, no fire, but the sound of 10 guns firing at once might as well have been. Lorenzo threw himself over Elena, bearing her to the wet pavement as bullets screamed overhead. His body became her shield, his weight pressing her into rain-soaked concrete that smelled like exhaust and blood. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see, could only feel his heart hammering against her back and his voice in her ear. Stay down. Stay down, stay down, like a mantra between prayer and command. The gunfire stopped, sudden, eerie. Lorenzo lifted his head slowly, assessing. 3 of Moretti's men were down, 2 of his own. The black van's driver was slumped over the wheel, windshield spider-webbed with bullet holes. Sirens wailed in the distance. NYPD, maybe 5 minutes out, too far to help, close enough to complicate everything. Moretti stood in the cathedral doorway, breathing hard, his expensive suit ruined, blood trickling from his split lip. His remaining men aimed weapons at Lorenzo's remaining men in a tableau of mutual destruction. Mexican standoff outside the House of God. Enough. Moretti's voice cut through the rain and chaos. He spat blood onto marble steps. Enough, Lorenzo. Lorenzo slowly pushed himself up, pulling Elena with him, keeping her behind him, his body still between her and every gun in the vicinity. His shoulder was bleeding through his shirt, the wound reopened, maybe worse, but his gun hand was steady, aimed at Moretti's chest. You started this, Lorenzo said, voice cold as winter. Finish it or walk away. Moretti looked at the bodies, at the sirens getting closer, at Elena, half hidden behind Lorenzo, her dress torn, her face scraped, but her eyes, God, her eyes were blazing with something between terror and fury, alive and defiant, and absolutely refusing to be a victim. She's more than I thought, Moretti said finally, and something like respect flickered across his face. Your father's daughter. Antonio was a coward and a thief, but he loved his family enough to die protecting them. You've got that same stupid loyalty in your eyes. Girl. Don't talk to her, Lorenzo warned. I'm talking to you, Lorenzo. Through her. Moretti lowered his weapon slowly, not surrender but détente. You fought for her. Actually fought. Bled. Risked everything. That tells me something. What does it tell you? That she's worth the $2 million I lost. That her debt is paid not in cash but in blood. Yours. Mine. Enough bodies on these steps to satisfy whatever honor I had left. Moretti looked at his remaining men. We're done here. Stand down. The guns lowered incrementally. The pressure in the air shifted from explosive to merely dangerous. Why? Lorenzo didn't lower his weapon. Why let this go now? Because I'm old, Lorenzo. Tired. I've been fighting over scraps of pride for 30 years. And for what? More graves to visit? More enemies' funerals to attend while watching over my shoulder? Moretti's eyes moved to Elena again. Your father stole from me, girl. But he also taught you something valuable, that some things matter more than diamonds. Family, love, the people you'd burn the world down to protect. He turned, started walking toward his car. His men followed. But he paused, looked back. You win, Lorenzo. She's yours. The debt dies here. But understand something you've chosen. You've shown your hand. Every enemy you have now knows you've got a weakness, a girl you'll bleed for. They'll come for her. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But they'll come. Let them. Lorenzo's voice was granite. I'll be ready. Moretti almost smiled. You better be. Because the wolf who falls in love stops being a wolf. He becomes something easier to kill. A pause. But maybe something more worth being. He got in his car. Drove away. The sirens were 3 blocks out now. Lorenzo holstered his weapon, turned to Elena, and for a moment just looked at her. Really looked, like he was cataloging that she was alive, whole, still breathing. Then he pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest despite his wounds, his face buried in her rain-soaked hair. You didn't stay in the car, he said, and it came out somewhere between accusation and relief. They killed Tommaso. They dragged me out. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for surviving. He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away rain and tears and blood that wasn't hers. You're alive. That's all that matters. You're alive and you're mine, and, his voice cracked, and I love you. The words hung between them like something tangible, like he'd pulled out his heart and handed it to her in the middle of Fifth Avenue, with sirens closing in. Say that again, Elena whispered. I love you. I shouldn't. It's stupid and dangerous, and it makes me weak in ways that could get us both killed. But I love you, Elena Rossi. You walked into my restaurant and reminded me I was human. And I don't want to forget again. She kissed him, then desperate and hard and tasting like rain and gunpowder and the specific flavor of almost dying. His arms tightened around her, careful of her injuries, mindless of his own. We need to go, one of his men said urgently. NYPD, 2 blocks. Lorenzo pulled away, grabbed Elena's hand. Can you run? With you? Anywhere. They ran. 3 days later, Safe House, Connecticut. The house was small compared to the Long Island estate. Rustic. A cabin on 20 acres of forest, the kind of place where you could disappear if you needed to, where the world forgot you existed. Elena sat on the porch at sunrise, wrapped in Lorenzo's sweater too big, smelling like him, watching mist rise from the lake. Her ribs were bruised but not broken. Her face was scraped but healing. She'd been examined by a doctor Lorenzo trusted, given antibiotics and painkillers and orders to rest. Rest. The word felt foreign. The screen door creaked. Lorenzo emerged, 2 mugs of coffee in hand, his shoulder professionally bandaged now, his face less haggard than it had been 3 days ago. He sat beside her, handed her a mug, and for a while they just existed in comfortable silence. What happens now? Elena asked finally. Now we figure out what living looks like. Lorenzo sipped his coffee, staring at the lake. I've made arrangements. Your mother's apartment is paid for full year, up front. The debt collectors have been paid off. Your record is clean. You could walk away, Elena. Go back to school. Finish Juilliard. Live the life your father's mistakes stole from you. Elena turned to look at him. Is that what you want? What I want. He stopped, jaw working. What I want is you. Safe. Happy. Alive. Even if that means not being with me. And if I want you? His eyes met hers, and she saw the hope there, carefully guarded but unmistakable. Then you'd be choosing a complicated life. I'm not leaving the family business. Can't, even if I wanted to. But I can be more careful, more strategic, less reckless. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I can build you a life that's as normal as possible for a woman in love with a mafia boss. In love, Elena repeated softly. You think I love you? I think you ran toward gunfire for me. I think you pray for my soul. I think you look at me like I'm worth redemption. His hand cupped her face. If that's not love, it's close enough that I'll take it. Elena set down her coffee and climbed into his lap, careful of his injuries, mindful of her own, and kissed him slow and deep, the kind of kiss that's a promise and a choice, and an answer to questions you didn't know how to ask. I love you, she said when they broke apart. I love you, Lorenzo Valenti. Not despite who you are. Not trying to fix you or change you. Just you. The man who plays Chopin at 2 a.m., who loves his mother enough to hire strangers who speak dying languages, who bled on cathedral steps for a girl who scrubs floors. Something broke in his expression, some last wall crumbling, and he kissed her again, pulling her closer, holding her like she was the only real thing in a world of smoke and mirrors. "There's something you need to know," he said against her lips. "Something I found out. About your father. About why Moretti really wanted you." Elena pulled back, searching his face. "What?" "When my men investigated your father's disappearance with the diamonds, they found something. A safety deposit box he'd rented under a fake name. Inside was a letter. For you." He pulled a folded envelope from his pocket, old, yellowed, sealed with wax that had cracked with time. Elena took it with shaking hands, broke the seal, read her father's handwriting for the first time in 3 years. "My darling Elena, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and my sins have finally found you. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry for the debt, the fear, the life I stole from you. The truth. I did take Moretti's diamonds, not for greed, for your mother. She was sick, cancer they said was terminal. The insurance wouldn't cover the treatment. We were drowning. So I took the diamonds, sold them, saved her life. She never knew. No one knew. I let them think I was just a gambler, a coward, a thief. Better that than she lives with guilt that her life cost yours. The debt is real. The danger is real. But know this. Every choice I made for family, for love. Maybe that doesn't excuse it, but maybe it explains it. I love you. I'm sorry. Be braver than I was, Dad." Elena read it twice, then sat staring at the paper as tears tracked down her face. Lorenzo's arms came around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Your mother's alive because of him?" he said quietly. "He wasn't just a thief. He was a father trying to save someone he loved. That doesn't erase the consequences, but it changes the story. He died protecting us," Elena whispered. "The heart attack, the doctors said, was stress and drinking. Was Moretti's men catching up to him? We found evidence. Your father ran himself to death, keeping them away from you and your mother." Lorenzo's arms tightened. "He was a lot of things, Elena, but he was brave when it mattered." Elena folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her chest. "I spent 3 years hating him, thinking he was weak. He was human, made impossible choices between bad options, just like we all do." Lorenzo turned her face toward his. "The question is, can you forgive him? Can you let go of the anger?" Elena thought about her father, about Lorenzo, about herself, kneeling on marble floors and praying in dying languages and choosing compassion over fear. "I can try," she said finally. "I think forgiveness is like prayer. You do it even when you're not sure it's working. You do it because not doing it leaves you poisoned." Lorenzo smiled, rare, genuine, beautiful. "See? That's why I love you. You're wise in ways I'll never be." 2 months later, Long Island Estate. Mama Donata sat in the garden, Elena beside her, both speaking in Arboratia, laughing at some story about Lorenzo as a boy trying to catch fireflies and ending up covered in mud. The old woman was having a good day, lucid, warm, her eyes clear and bright. Lorenzo watched from the library window, Signora Bianchi beside him with a tablet containing the day's business. "The ports are secure," she said. "The territory disputes are settled. Moretti kept his word, no retaliation, no further contact. You've consolidated power, Don Valenti. You're stronger now than before the conflict." "Good." Lorenzo's eyes never left Elena. She wore a simple dress, her hair down, her face lit with joy as she helped Mama Donata stand, both of them walking slowly toward the roses. "And Miss Rossi?" Signora Bianchi's tone was carefully neutral. "What are her official duties now?" Lorenzo smiled. "Companion to my mother, keeper of dying languages, reminder that I'm human." He paused. "And in 6 months, if she says yes, my wife." Signora Bianchi's eyebrows rose. "You're going to propose?" "I already did, this morning." She said she needed time to think. His smile widened. "Which means she's considering it. Which means I haven't completely destroyed her capacity for good judgment. And if she says no, then I ask again, and again, until she realizes I'm not going anywhere, and she might as well make it official." Lorenzo finally turned from the window. "I've spent my life building an empire, taking territory, accumulating power. But the only thing worth having is walking in my garden right now, teaching my mother to smile again." Signora Bianchi studied him, then allowed herself a rare smile. Your father would not understand this choice. My father is dead. And I'm not him. Lorenzo's voice was firm. I'm trying to be better. Maybe I'll fail. Probably I'll fail, but I'm going to fail trying to be a man worthy of her, instead of succeeding at being a monster who dies alone. The older woman nodded, closed her tablet. Then I wish you luck, Don Valenti. Lorenzo, he corrected. When I'm with her, I'm just Lorenzo. That evening, the garden at sunset, Elena found Lorenzo in their spot, the bench overlooking the roses, where they'd first almost kissed, where everything had begun to change. He was dressed casually now, no suit, just dark jeans and a sweater, looking almost normal if you ignored the way he moved, the alertness that never quite left his eyes. You asked me a question this morning, Elena said, sitting beside him. I did. It was a big question. It was. His hand found hers, laced their fingers together. You can say no. I'll understand. I'll wait. I'll ask again in 6 months, or a year, or... Yes. Lorenzo stopped breathing. What? Yes, Lorenzo. I'll marry you. Elena turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with tears and certainty. I'll marry you because you're the first person who ever saw me, really saw me, not as a servant or a debt or a problem to solve, but as someone who mattered, because you bled for me on cathedral steps, because you play Chopin like you're exorcising demons, because when your mother's confused, you let me be the one who brings her back, and you trust me with the person you love most. She cupped his face, her rough hands gentle against his scarred skin. I'll marry you because I love you. Not the Don, not the wolf. You, Lorenzo, the man who's trying to be better, the man who taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about choosing differently now. Lorenzo pulled her into his lap, kissed her hard enough to bruise, gentle enough to worship. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, and his eyes were wet. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Good thing love isn't about deserving. Elena's fingers traced the scar above his eyebrow, the line of his jaw, memorizing him. It's about choosing. And I choose you, every day. As long as you'll have me. Forever then. His voice was rough with emotion. I'll have you forever. The sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the distance, Mama Donata's laughter drifted from an open window. She was inside now, listening to music, having one of her rare clear evenings. And Elena thought about her father, about his letter, about impossible choices, and the things people do for love. She thought about prayers in dying languages and compassion stronger than fear. She thought about kneeling on marble floors and changing everything with one choice, one act of grace. There's something I need to know, Lorenzo said, pulling back to look at her. When we're married, when you're Signora Valenti, what do you want? What's your dream, Elena? Beyond this, beyond me. Elena smiled. I want to teach music. Open a school for kids who can't afford lessons. Kids like I was. I want to keep dying languages alive. Maybe record Mama Donata's stories. Preserve them. And... She hesitated. And I want us to be happy. Really happy. I want to build something good with you, Lorenzo. Not despite who you are, but because of it. Because you understand that the past doesn't define the future. That we can choose redemption even when we don't deserve it. Lorenzo kissed her forehead, pulled her close. Then that's what we'll build. Together. Love changes us. Sometimes it's a dramatic moment, a confession, a risk, a choice that alters everything. Sometimes it's quiet learning to see someone fully, choosing them again and again. Has love ever redeemed you? Or have you been someone's redemption? Tell us your story in the comments. We believe in second chances, in prayers that get answered, in grace that shows up when you least expect it. 6 months later, the wedding was small, private, held in the estate's garden under a canopy of late spring flowers, with only Mama Donata, Signora Bianchi, Lorenzo's most trusted men, and Elena's mother healthy now, weeping happy tears in attendance. Elena wore a simple dress, cream-colored lace, with her grandmother's rosary wrapped around her bouquet. Lorenzo wore a dark suit and an expression of wonder, like he still couldn't believe this was real, that he got to keep her. When they said their vows in English, then in Italian, then finally in Arborish for Mama Donata, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. You stole my heart in a restaurant, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying despite its softness, with a prayer, with kindness, with 60 seconds of grace I didn't know I was waiting for, and I've loved you every second since. I'll love you every second after. Until I stop breathing. Until the world ends. Until there's nothing left but us. Elena's vows were simpler. I choose you. I see you. I love you. Today. And always. They kissed as husband and wife while Mama Donata clapped and cried and called them her angels in the language of home. And later, much later, after the small celebration, after the guests had left, Elena and Lorenzo stood on their balcony overlooking the gardens. The sound, the city lights in the distance. Any regrets? Lorenzo asked, his arms around her from behind. Not one. Elena leaned back into him. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. He kissed her temple. That I wasted years being the wolf when I could have been looking for the woman who'd teach me how to be human again. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him in the moonlight. You found me when we both needed it. Not a moment too soon. Not a moment too late. Exactly when fate or God, or whatever moves the universe, decided we were ready. Fate, Lorenzo mused. You believe in that? I believe that prayers get answered. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. Sometimes by people we never would have chosen. She smiled. I prayed for safety, for a way out, for something better. And the universe sent me a wolf who learned how to love. Lorenzo laughed deep, genuine, the sound of a man who'd found his way home. And I got a saint who wasn't afraid to kneel in the face of danger, to choose compassion over fear, to save a monster with a prayer. You're not a monster, Lorenzo. Maybe not anymore. He kissed her, soft and lingering. Maybe you prayed the monster away. Maybe that's how redemption works. Someone loves you enough that you become who they see instead of who you were. Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady, strong, alive. Then keep becoming, amore. And I'll keep praying. For you. For us. For whatever comes next. Whatever comes next, Lorenzo echoed, holding her close. As long as it's together. And somewhere in the mansion, Mama Donata slept peacefully, dreaming in Arboresh. Somewhere in Queens, Elena's mother lit a candle for her husband's soul and whispered forgiveness. Somewhere in New Jersey, Marco Moretti raised a glass to the wolf who'd chosen love over empire and lived. And in New York City, rain began to fall gentle, cleansing, the kind of rain that washes things clean and makes room for new growth, the kind of rain that sounds like grace,